IG, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
Okay. And also here, we would like to welcome Nkiru Uzodi, who's a lawyer and senior program officer at the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, Black. Nkiru, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning.
And we also have a familiar face on the program, Dr. Benson Olubo, Executive Director, Clean Foundation. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, and thank you.
All right, so those are the guests we have in the meantime. Just before we bring in the IG, that's the retired IG, to speak on whether the new act promises a new dawn for the Nigerian police force, let's have a bit of a background. And Dr. Benson Olubo, who is of Clean Foundation, of course, obviously has a good grasp of this background. The new Police Act 2020 has had a long journey, and some persons will say well over 15 years. I recall there was a stakeholder gathering sometime in 2004 at which the old Police Act was examined and re-examined, and propositions then made for a reform. How has the journey been to achieving a new Police Act 2020?
Thank you very much. I think it has been an interesting journey. The Clean Foundation was established in 1998, and one of the key missions of the Clean Foundation is to promote public safety and security, and that is actually reform the Nigerian police force. And we are 22 years this year, so that tells you that the process of reforming the Police Act actually predates the establishment of Clean Foundation. But I remember that in 2002, we did what we call a panel study, civil society panel, on the key things that we should do on the Police Act. And they were quite some of the things that have been looked at now. The reality is that if you look at the law, it says Nigerian Police Act 2004. It's actually 1943. The changes that were made are more or less cosmetic. So since independence even till now, we've been using a law that was bequeathed to us by our colonial masters. So there is actually that need. If you look at the process of lawmaking, there's what we call autonomous constitution made by the people. You know, we've run it for some time now. We have the 1999. So the same thing also should have happened with the Police Act, because the police is very important in security in Nigeria. So there have been different processes getting to the National Assembly. Of course, you know you need the concurrence of the two assemblies, the Senate and the House of Reps. But we must commend, and I think I will have to put it on record there, that in the 8th Assembly, the former president of the Senate, Abubakar Saraki, Dr. Saraki, had made a promise to civil societies when we had a meeting with him that that law will be passed, you know, and he made it possible that that law was actually passed, I think, 2018. But what happened was that there was a problem with the version by the House of Reps, and it didn't get the light of the day. So interestingly, of course, we had to come back again. But some of the key things, if we want to say, is one, we've always said that the tenure of the Inspector General of Police. Currently, the Inspector General of Police actually sleeps with two eyes open. One eye has to fight criminality, and then the second eye has to watch the political language of the president, because he serves at the leisure of the president. But now, the law says you have to spend 4 years unless you are found wanting. And then it also tries to strengthen the police council. The police council was in the previous one, but it has not really worked. And so we see it that one of the key things that the law is planning to do is also have that opportunity for the police council actually to be involved in the appointment of the IG. Then there is the issue of community policing. If you recall, former President Olusegun Obasanjo in 2004 actually established community policing, and he started with a pilot project in Enugu State. But interestingly, it was more or less a donor-driven project. And when he left, that process didn't see the light of the day. There was no continuity. And there have been other IGs who have tried it. But this is the first time that it's actually in a law, which means now that there is legal backing for it. Also, there are issues of discipline, especially when police officers are caught against the law. There is need for you to actually deal with them. different activities have been done. Of course, originally, the Police Service Commission actually has the power to discipline, to recruit and appoint, and also promote. Even though one can ask, is there any difference between recruitment and an appointment? But that's a discussion for another day. So what has happened is that in 2014, the Clean Foundation started a project we called Stop the Bribes platform. And that was actually opportunity to get low-level officers who were caught in collecting bribes at the roadblocks. The Nigerians said they were wary of police officers who normally harass them. Of course, you also remember during COVID, actually, one of the key things that happened in the Southeast is that they were not afraid of coronavirus, but they were wearing the face masks because they were scared of security agencies. Because when they get to the security block, the policeman doesn't have a face mask, but he will arrest you because you're not wearing a face mask. So that in 2014 resonated, and we set up this Stop the Bribes platform. So now, when IGP Arase came in, he kind of continued that process and set up the Complaints Response Unit. Of course, in Nigeria, one of the problems we always have in Nigeria is that some ideas die young. So when he left, there was this fear that that Complaints Response Unit may not continue. And we felt that best way to get that legacy, part of our law, was to put it in the law. And hopefully that has come now. So the Complaints Response Unit is there. There's also the issue of funding, reward system for police officers. There are excellent and gallant Nigerian police officers who have done well for this country. But either when they die or if they retire, nobody remembers them. Nobody gives them that, we love you, we appreciate what you've done. So this reward system actually tries to support them. And then there is this funding mechanism, of course, which complements what IGP Abba is working on, the trust fund, to ensure that the funding of the police is robust. Because we know that the police is a key instrument in maintaining law and order. I've always argued that after the president, the next person in Nigeria is the Inspector General of Police, because he has instruments of power. And that person, the person who occupies that position, should actually be removed from political influence.
But before we get down to the nitty-gritties of the objectives of the, the Police Act, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, you've been, in Kiru Uzori, that is, you've been at the center of looking at these issues and trying to look at how they really affect the Nigerian people, talking about critiquing the whole issue. How do you see the Police Act of 2020, how, good or bad it is, compared to what we used to have?
I think this new act is a significant improvement from what existed before. So the old Police Act was not very clear on the use of police powers. For us in civil society, I think that is something that is very, very key, clarity on use of police powers. It left too much discretion to police officers when it came to, powers such as arrest and search. So what this new act has done is to create procedural safeguards and outline clear procedures that police officers must follow when they are making arrests or executing search warrants. And I think this is going to be of interest to citizens, considering the tense interactions that citizens have with police officers, on a daily basis. So, for instance, in carrying out a search, police officers now are mandated to either be in uniform or wear a visible ID card. And before a search is conducted, the officer has to inform the person being searched, why he's being searched. And there's also a requirement for every search conducted to be recorded. And in the Act also, there are new power. The functions of the IGP are now clearly stated. In the former Act, the functions of the IGP was not clearly stated. And the Act was drafted in such a way that there was, kind of more of a focus on state security. Now it takes in, human security into cognizance and emphasizes that the role of the police is not just to prevent crime, but also to protect fundamental freedoms of citizens, promote human rights, respect conventions that Nigerians are signatory to, promote provisions in Chapter 4 of the Constitution. So for us in civil society, I think for the average Nigerian, I think those are the most significant provisions, because that is where a lot of police officers kind of fall short. And then in the Act right now, there's provision mandating training of officers. So the IGP is now mandated to ensure that every single police officer, irrespective of gender, gets training. and also that suspects who are in legal custody are informed of their rights to representation. So I think those are some of the very, very significant provisions. Of course, Benson has mentioned the tenure, which I think is really a huge milestone, considering that the IGP had no tenure. So I think these are some of the very, very key things that those of us in civil society were really keen on seeing in the Act, and we're happy that is in this new Act.
But really, Nkiru, the search and warrant thing has not been so much explained in the Act or in the bill, I must say, given the fact that, you know, the Act does not really now, you know, specify in detail the facts of, you know, searching somebody who is supposed to be searched or arresting somebody who is supposed to be arrested. The warrants are not so much detail there. And what can you say about the search and warrant, you know, portion or section of that very act, of this very act of 2020 Police Act?
Actually, the search provisions they're actually detailed in the previous acts. I don't think there were any details on procedure. And the Act also incorporated provisions from the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. So what it has done is it has harmonized the two provisions, because there are provisions in the Act that, you know, talk about police powers. So it incorporated some of those provisions. So I'm going to give you an example, for instance, and it even improved on some of them. In the Act, for instance, there's a provision on examination of arrested suspects. And it, you know, it has very a generic clause. But now this new Police Act goes further to say, before a suspect who is in custody is being examined, these are the steps that must be followed. The same thing with the search. It's actually more detailed. There is no other provision aside from this new Police Act that has detailed provision on search. And even then, it still gives some leverage or to the police officer to use some form of discretion. You know, there has to be a balance between discretionary powers and procedure. But the good thing is, you know, when procedures are imputed in a law, what it does is that it gives a basis for judicial review should the conduct be called into question. So it still gives the police powers to, you know, act based on reasonable suspicion. But that reasonable suspicion has to be based on objective facts. So unlike the previous acts, which just says, you know, the police has discretion to do A, B, C, or D. So now there are certain provisions that are outlined and saying these are the procedures you must follow. And like I mentioned, every search has to now be documented. And I think, you know, in addition to that, it's also incorporated provision of the Act that requires the IGP to send to send reports to the Police Service Commission and to the AGF. Even police stations now are required to send every month to the magistrates record of arrests undertaken by police officers in that station. So I think they're actually more detailed than what exists. But like I said, it still gives room for police officers to exercise a level of discretion in the exercise of their duties.
All right. Thank you very much, Nkiru Uzodi, for your responses. Well, you used the word ACJA several times, ACJA, so that our viewers would know precisely what we're talking about. Administration of Criminal Justice Act. That's what ACJA stands for. Let's bring in our former Inspector General of Police, Suleiman Abba. Nigeria Police Act 2020 repeals and reenacts the previous act that was 77 years old. So, we have a new police force, true or false?
No, and yes. No, because the Nigeria police is the same. I think the Constitution remains the number one law. Nothing has happened to it. There's still one Nigeria police. The act itself, just like my colleague said, yes, I think 43 or 46 was the actual date. For us to now have a lot of improvement in it, I think I should congratulate Nigerians, people living in Nigeria. I should also congratulate the Inspector General of Police and other police officers, because the improvements are on all sides. I'm very happy that this has happened, and I'm glad I also contributed, if not in making the law, at least in ensuring that we encourage the signing. If you would really want me to comment on areas that I believe are very important to the Nigeria police, and that makes it new police, the issue of remunerations. A situation where other security organizations take home a salary that is better than that of the police. And when the police is the leading agency in internal security, I think the Act has done justice. It says no security agency will take remunerations over and above what the police takes. It may take some time to really align it and put things in order, but at least it's very promising. And to all police officers, serving and retired, including me. And the second thing is the funding. Police has always have two problems: funding, manpower. This funding that the Act is very specific about has solved more than half of the problem, because the trust fund is there to also support it. In any case, we will not allow duplication. Otherwise, it will be fraudulent. Wherever the IGP is given, and thank God are also contributing in making sure that the police is put on first line charge when I was IGP. And I appreciate the then leader of the Senate committee, if I may call him, Senator McCarthy, and the leader of the House committee responsible for that, the then Deputy Speaker of the House. They ensured that I begged them, and they worked on it. So if the IGP is going to get improved funding, that's good. But we'll ensure that wherever he's given and whatever he does with the fund, there will be no repeat from the trust fund. So thank God again, the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Planning has a representative in the Police Trust Fund, in the person of the DG Budget. So I'm sure he will guide us to ensure that that does not happen. Other beautiful things that I see in the Act, of course, that will also lead to a new police, is includes the issue that the issues of arrests. A situation where, we have been managing bad acts for a very long time. A very long time. That was why when I became IGP, I wanted, and I started, a focus on, attitudinal change. Whatever you do with a person, if you don't encourage him to change himself, it will just be like one step forward, two steps backward. So I concentrated on that, and, the elections came, and they were looking for scapegoat, and they found one of, not me, in the police, but I paid the price. Now, if the attributes of a police officer, and that is one area that I want to say that what has happened is that the Police Act incorporated, provisions in the police, in CPC and CPA, like the issues of arrests. It's not that they were not there. They were there. The police had never been arresting people either on the road or searching people either on the road or in their homes without a guidance. There were guidance in the CPA and the CPC.
Sorry, again, for the benefit of our viewers, so that they don't think that CPC is a political party.
I like that. Well,
Criminal Procedure Code.
The CPC is the Criminal Procedure Code, and it applies to the northern part of the country. And the CPA is the Criminal Procedure Act, which applies to the states in the southern part. Why the differences, of course, I think had to do with the cultural background, if you like. I think it's not a day for it. So there were many things that were guiding the policeman in his actions, including the police regulations. Now, in police regulations, you can see a beautiful thing there, the attributes of a police officer. Now, these are attributes that guide a police officer from allowing sentiments, whether of tribe, of religion, of background, and so on, from affecting his investigations, even the arrests, even the search, and so on. So the Act has now, collected all this and put them in one place. I must congratulate the President for assenting to this Act.
Yeah, truly speaking, you've made some valid points there. But when we look at the whole gamut of the Act itself, it seems as if it has touched almost every aspect of the Nigerian police force, in the sense that it is trying to improve it and make it more efficient and more effective, as Kingsley rightly asked, whether it's going to be a new police force or whatever.
Absolutely. The main aim of the new Act is to make the police more effective, more efficient, but I still repeat, it cannot happen without appropriate funding, manpower, and I want to say that unless we have at least 500,000 police officers, we may not see the differences we want to see.
You mentioned one aspect of, this whole thing, that's talking about what you really did, and of course, what you started, as you said, attitudinal change. How far has this Act gone in trying to address this issue? Because this is one very important aspect of the Nigerian community, if I may use that phrase, talking about Nigerian police not having a very good image. And this all has to do with attitude of the Nigerian police towards the community it serves.
What the law has done now is that it has started with force in attitudinal change. It's telling the police officer that if you don't arrest in this way, you have violated the law. And in the police, like in all other law enforcement agencies, if you act outside the provisions of the law, you alone will take the grudge. So the law, what the law has done now is that it's starting with the policeman to behave according to the provisions of the law. And there are also procedures in taking care of persons or police officers who violated the law, either through ordinary room trial or through the issue of query, so long as members of the public cooperate and report, violation of their rights. And this law is so beautiful. We can't continue to operate, in the 1940s. This is 2020. The police must change. A situation where a policeman stops you on the road simply because, of course, I don't like people who beat the light. Because to me, you are trying to create chaos. But there are certain offenses, traffic offenses, that an offender can either be warned or be told to report to a police station. A situation where you are forced to open your door and policemen or traffic men rush into your car and, creating scenes on the road should not continue to happen. So this law is taking care of those things. They must learn to operate according to the provisions of the law. I'm happy. These are things in line with the attitudinal change, the use of force first, but it's either you change because of the provisions of the law, the consequences of your action, or you will face the grudge of the law.
But like other institutions, the police had these laws before. I believe there should be some disciplinary, measures and processes as regards, failure to carry out duties or going beyond limits as the case may be. I'm talking about what new things are there in order to make the police see that things have changed and the way we used to do things, it should not be business as usual as regards attitudinal change.
Yes, the new things in it are, you cannot have the same law under colonial era with a law under a democratic era and expect the same effect. The law in this 2020 is mindful of the fact that we are in a democratic setting. And so the policeman must have to know that he's not there just to harass members of the public, but he's there to assist them so that they will also assist him. It's a very clear thing. The issue of attitudinal change is much more personal than official, I would say. When you are talking about discipline, and I'm glad my research at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies was an assessment of discipline in the Nigeria police. And it's a topic that I was given, and I'm proud of the fact that I did a beautiful research. Discipline generally are twofold.
And your supervisors confirmed that?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I became an examiner thereafter.
Oh,
so that can tell you. I became an examiner thereafter. Okay. But the most important, what I'm trying to say is this. Discipline is twofold. It is personal and it is general. Now we are talking about the general, what the law has provided. Personal is the attitudinal issue.
All right, IG, thank you very much. Let's bring in again Dr. Benson Olugbo. Interestingly, some of the aspects that you touched on earlier on Kiru, as well as former IG Suleiman Abba, just referring obviously to the philosophy of policing. Do we, from your examination of the new Police Act 2020, do we now have some clarity as to the mission of the Nigeria police force? I remember that during the Obasanjo time, there was some issues about, look, removing the force from the NPF and just making it Nigeria police. But from the colonial era, when we had the Police Act of 1943, and up till now, of course, the law, of course, is a new one, it has always been an attitude of us versus them. What do we now see embedded in the new act? Do we now see a community of citizens and law enforcement officers seeking protection for everyone and for all?
Yeah, you are trying to ask me if the hood makes the monk. the hood doesn't make the monk. I think the monk has to act in a way that the hood reflects who the monk is. There was a tension, really. I think it's also one of the problems we had, that it wasn't passed earlier on. If you look at reforms that have happened in Africa, in terms of police reform, if you look at South Africa, Kenya, so they are called service. And I think that's the orientation, really. The original concept of policing in Nigeria by the colonial masters was actually to subjugate the Nigerians and not to support or to respect their rights. So we felt there was need for a change of philosophy. So instead of Nigerian police force, because there's something about force, let's call it Nigerian Police Service, which is actually reflected now, because the new law talks about the objectives, the need for a police force that is democratic policing, meets the yearnings of the people, protects the rights of citizens. But when the issue of force came in, some of the police officers who were in the room when we were discussing this said, instead of, one is a constitutional issue, because the constitution recognizes Nigerian police force. Yes. So you cannot remove force without altering or amending the constitution. That's one. Secondly, all the police officers in the room said they would prefer you have Nigerian police.
Without service.
Without service.
I joined that.
And without force.
Yes.
So if you must remove force, just leave Nigerian police.
Yes.
But don't add service. Correct. Because the idea also is that if you add service, Nigeria will not see them as, Nigeria will not respect them. But that is an argument for. So the current law actually tries to deal with that issue of who is a police officer and what is the responsibility of the police officer and a citizen. Recollect that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria recognizes that you are innocent until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. Unfortunately, the policing we have in Nigeria is that you are guilty when you are arrested, and then you have to prove that you're innocent, which is kind of a philosophical issue that actually needs to go through changes, So attitudinal changes needs to happen, and that is why there is a need for training and retraining of police officers. And I guess that's also one of the key things, the cardinal issues that is in the new act. It looks at what is the mission, what is the vision, and what are the objectives. And the fact that the whole thing about protection of citizens' lives and properties actually means also that it is assumed that every person who is arrested should be given that right to defend himself. The law actually says now that you cannot arrest somebody in lieu, which is normally what happens, or that you cannot arrest somebody because of a civil action, which is adverse everywhere. So Of course, there's a...
Explain in lieu
Okay,
so that our
yes.
viewers will
So,
understand, yes.
there is a case that is actually on now. The police went to arrest somebody, and unfortunately, the person wasn't there. They picked up the girlfriend, and the girlfriend, unfortunately, has died. So there's a petition that is going on. So the law says you cannot do that. If you go to somebody's house, the arrest warrant says A, and A is not there, you cannot pick B, C, or D. This is normally what happens in Nigeria. If you go to somebody's house, the person is not there. You pick the wife, you pick the family, you pick somebody else in order to lure the person to come. So the law is saying you cannot do that. Like Nkiru also said, what this law actually tried to do is to also implement what is already existing, and that is the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. Because, you know, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act fused the Criminal Procedure Code and the Criminal Procedure Act into one composite legislation. So what has happened now is that the responsibilities of the police have now been migrated from that act and reformed or refined somehow into the new police act that we have. But it will take time in terms of training, in terms of resource allocation, like former IGP said, and also attitudinal change to realize that it's not just what is in the law. It is also about recruitment. I think we've said it here before, that there's actually need that when you are recruiting police officers, there is need for psychological evaluation. And subsequently also, we believe from the researches we have done that there is need to also continue psychological evaluation because people who enter the police sometimes are stressed out. So there's also what you can call post-traumatic stress syndrome that might be in the police, but nobody has actually looked at it. Because you see a normal person who enters the police, but after some years, it's like something is wrong somewhere. And we don't take care of our own.
It's the society.
We don't take care of our own. What also happens is that people who have been stressed, people who are depressed because of the kind of work they are doing, Nigeria doesn't support them. So it's like if you become sick, they retire you or they dismiss you, or you know, something happens. So I think it's a composite thing. Nigeria should support the police, and I think police should also support citizens. And I think it's something that we can work together to make Nigeria a better place.
When you talk about supporting the police, Nigerians generally talking about that, you are in a way saying that the Nigerian populace should be part, or rather appreciate, you know, the fact that the police is their friend. And looking at this issue of, you know, working together, how has the act, or how is the act going to really address the issue of, you know, the policeman seeing himself as a friend and not somebody who is supposed to be feared? Because that's the campaign all over. All over, people feel as if once there's a policeman around, scared, you know, feeling guilty, even if you are not, and things like that. How is the act trying to address this?
So that's the community partnership that is currently in the act, which I already earlier on alluded to, that President Obasanjo just started community policing. There's also a misconception about community policing. It's not state police. State police is a discussion for another day. Yeah. What it actually tries to tell us is that the community actually, in the original policing, is the community that is the police. And the police is the community. Because effective policing cannot take place without intelligence gathering. And who gathers intelligence is the community. When a policeman enters a community, he looks for the gatekeepers. He looks for the, you know, the people who understands the terrain, the dynamics and all those things. So that's one of the key things that the act is trying to do, to bring up this concept of community policing, community partnership, where the community is part of provision of policing, where the police partners with the community in terms of provision. And it also stretches now to this issue of recruiting inspectors, you know, from the locals, where of course they understand the language of the people and all those things. So I think it's a step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction, but also of course every solution brings its own problem. The problem that it's trying to bring now is that people are misplacing community policing with state police.
Or even an independent policing.
An independent policing. And then the second issue, before I keep quiet, is that the...
You don't have to keep quiet. Anyway.
Okay. The second issue is that the Police Service Commission is not happy with some aspects of this law for obvious reasons. Because the Police Service Commission, if you recollect, the act is embedded in the Constitution. So somehow, it forms part of the Constitution. So now, the IG has the power to recruit some, you know, constables under the new law. But the Police Service Commission is arguing that you cannot remove the law, you cannot remove a right given to them by the Constitution. So you need to amend the Constitution first. Of course, ours is maybe you need to go to court and seek for an interpretation. But the reality is that that concept of community policing will actually help us to overcome the tension that is between average policeman and average Nigerian. It's real. I mean, we cannot wish it away.
Dr. Olugbo, thank you very much. Just to put it simply, what the Police Act 2020 stipulates is not community policing or state police, equivalent of state police, as we have seen in some statements by persons who are agitating for state police. But the whole idea of having the people and the police working together to ensure the safety and security of citizens and indeed all who are present in an environment. Nkiru Uzode, I still would like you to speak to the broad philosophical underpinning of the new Police Act, namely in terms of its mission, in terms of its objectives. I know earlier you talked about the use of police powers and how these have not been reformed, but in providing the guidance for proper orientation, because the former IG here talks about attitude and training that Benson has also referenced. Training, of course, will have to be grounded in the basic philosophy, understanding what the aims are, what the mission is, what the objective is, and how you view those whom you are supposed to be in partnership with to ensure safety and security.
So in the new acts, which now outlines the objectives of the police, I think it actually says that the aim is to create an efficient and effective police that is guided by the principles of accountability, and then you have the principle of transparency and the principle of respect for fundamental freedoms. And it also mentioned partnership with other security agencies, because that is also a key issue. It's common knowledge that there tends to be friction or tension, between security agencies. So now it's now in the law that the police must work together with other security agencies. And, in terms of attitudinal change, I think it goes back to what Benson is saying. I think the training is important. But I think at this stage, what is more important is actually creating an understanding of the law. This is an act that was just signed last week. I think a lot of people still don't know the contents. So, when you talk about legislation, they are rights holders, they are duty bearers. So the duty bearer is the police in this case. It's important that every police officer actually understands what this new law is saying. So it's expected that the training of officers will also incorporate, creating an understanding and awareness of the new contents and of the new missions and this philosophy of promoting fundamental freedoms, of accountability, of transparency. All these principles were not in the formal law. And also there needs to be awareness, on the side of the right holders, at the side of the people, to actually understand what the new provisions are, what their rights are, and what their entitlements are when they're having interactions with the Nigerian police. And I think I should also mention that there is also an outstanding police regulation that needs to be amended. So I think that will also go a long way, in contributing to attitudinal change. The Act doesn't contain all the details of policing. So there's an accompanying regulations which was originally, crafted in 1968. So this new Act, what it has done is that it's going to trigger a consequential review. It has now said that the minister and the IGP should review the regulations. Before, there was no provision mandating a review of the regulations. It was it was not very clear. But it's now clear, and it has said that the IGP and the Ministry of Police Affairs should do that regularly. Even the training contents and durations, the Act mandates a revision of training contents and duration every 5 years. And the review of those regulations are very, very important, because that is where you have the more granular and detailed aspects of policing, what happens day to day, and even the internal processes of the Nigerian police. And, for a lot of us, for those of us who are women and who are proponents of improved women's rights, we think the regulations is something hopefully that will kick in immediately, because the regulations contains provisions that are discriminatory to women officers. So in the police regulations, that is where you find those clauses that say only unmarried women can enlist in the force, and if an unmarried female police officer gets pregnant, she can be discharged. If she wants to get married, she needs consent or permission from her commissioner of police. Though these provisions only exist for the women, They don't exist for the men. Men are not held to that standard. And even then, I think there's a requirement that she must have served for at least 3 years. So I think all these things are very important to, to bring about or contribute to that attitudinal change and, foster kind of equality between male and female police officers.
Okiru, I would like you to expatiate further, or
Yes.
if you like, restate what you just said with
Yes.
regard to gender
Yes.
and how friendly the new provisions are.
So I said that the police regulations contain provisions that are discriminatory to women. And lots of women groups have been fighting to get this taken out, but it's been difficult because amendment of the regulations is hinged on the Police Act. So now this Police Act has now said that the regulation should be further amended. So the National Assembly, the regulation is a subsidiary, is what we call subsidiary legislation. It's not something that the National Assembly amends. It's left to the IGP and the minister in charge of police affairs. So the National Assembly has done its part. It has amended this act, and it has now included a provision to say IGP and Minister of Police Affairs go to the regulations and amend. So that is one, should I say, effect, or rather, that one major, should I say, a major accomplishment in this amendment. So if the regulations are now amended, then those provisions can actually change. Those provisions that says that only unmarried women can enlist in the Nigerian police. Those provisions that says that if an unmarried female police officer gets pregnant, she can be discharged. And which also requires that before she gets married, she needs consent. Male police officers are not required. Those provisions, it doesn't apply to them. It only applies to women. And in addition, the Act even goes further to create a clause saying that there should be no discrimination on the basis of gender.
It's very key.
Yes. So
Okiru, thanks, from IGP. Yes. I mean, how do the pre-existing regulation play out that an unmarried female police officer would seek and get the consent of a superior officer before getting married? How was that playing out?
Well, this is where the reference she's making is to an act and a regulation that has been there for over 50 years. 1968, the regulations,
yes.
The Act 1943. That has to do with the tradition then. We all came out from families, and we all know, until recently, the man is the head of the family. And I think, even in my own house, I still remain the head of my family. So, that the law has been very specific now. That's what I wanted to hear from her. And thank God she brought it at the last part of her talk. The law says it has removed all gender discrimination. It is now left to the women group to ensure that this provision action is taken on it. And we have a DIG, a woman police officer. We've had many of them, beautiful ones, very active. Adebanjo or Koronko, call them. They are, there are so many. There could have even been inspectors general of police. I expect them to all come together, ensure that they impress on the IGP to ensure that all discriminatory actions based on gender are removed. I also want to say that the law, the act, is specific with regards to community policing. It says clearly that community policing is now part of the police processes in, policing the community. And in that, I want to say that where the partnership, grows, it will get to a stage where it will be the community that will be telling the police, I want you to police me in this way. I want you to police me in this way. That's the tick about it. The partnership between the police and the community, if it grows, it will reach a level where the community will be the one dictating to the police on how they will be policed.
Yusuf raised a number of issues with you from IGP, and you also responded. training is part of education, and education is a lifelong process. The new Police Act is barely a week old, but from your experience in terms of the training programs that recruits and serving officers go through, what do you envisage as probably quick wins in terms of getting to the nitty-gritty of the new provisions in the Police Act so that these begin to have an impact on the law enforcement processes and the officers themselves, so that ultimately the people who get to be policed will say, wow, we are seeing a new police force. That this is not simply give us a new police act, give us a new police act, you have it now, and it is the same issue. I'm not talking about Roger. I mean, some of those will take issues, take a while to deal with, but just in terms of overall policing, how can we cascade down the training, that is the essence of the training derived from the new Police Act?
Two things. The instructors at the training schools, who I know belong to mainly two groups, those teaching law and those teaching police duties, which includes the left-right, marching parade, and so on. The second group are the supervisors, and it goes from the top to the online supervisor. Once these groups do their job properly, with so much ease, police officers will have a full knowledge of the law and they will begin to implement it. People will just see a surprising thing happening. I give you an example, and unfortunately it's a bit, I have to mention myself. When in 1991, there was a problem with the mobile police unit in Abuja, which we call Mopol 21. I was a 2IC in Mopol 20 in Ikeja. And the problem was that the government was moving to Abuja, and it was the only mobile police then. They were guarding so many places, but the boys had become drunkards. So there was the need for a change in leadership. So I was sent from Lagos to bring in the experience we had in Lagos here. One thing I did, just one thing I did, which was supervisionary issue, down the line, from myself, the commander, down to the unit commanders. What I did was simply, I changed the mode of, reporting to work. Instead of coming for 12 hours work, you now come for 24 hours. You come to work in the morning, perform your duty till the following morning. When you return my rifle, go straight to the Mami market and start drinking. Definitely before 6 o'clock, you will sleep. No matter the kind of brain you have, you will sleep. And then the following morning, you come out, pick up the rifle again, go to work. When you are doing the work, there was within a short time, people stopped seeing policemen sleeping on duty. By the way, at that time, they were brought from duty in beautiful, good-looking Unimog. Those beautiful, lorries that can dance even while conveying police officers. We don't see them again. And the effect will always show.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, retired IG. Just one point that you have raised now, and this is all embedded in policing about training. Well, it's a new dawn, we should say, but by mere observation, and the question is going to Benson Olugbo, so that we can derive this from this in terms of even exercising police powers and all that. Sometimes you find that cops on the beat, no matter how restricted that beat is, sometimes they're just ignorant of the law themselves.
Yes.
So, do we now have provisions in the new act that may help deal with that issue, so that when you see an offense being committed in your view, you know how to respond, how to exercise your powers as a law enforcement officer?
Yes, actually, one of the key things that is in the law is the Inspector General of Police to develop a policing plan. We've not had that. It's like a strategic plan.
We've had it.
Yeah, okay.
When we were doing the attitudinal change, let me tell you what we did.
Yeah, when I said being part of the law.
Yeah, getting it to the law is one thing.
Yes.
That maybe because I was retired, if I was there, it would have been there. What I did in the attitudinal change, attributes of police officer includes the fact that he should be knowledgeable on all provisions of the law. He should be tactful in his actions and so on. What I did was, I summarized it into a small pocket notebook, including me. All police officers were carrying it. And before you know it, by the time I went on a tour of Kaduna, I said, how many people can memorize the attributes of a police officer without reference to the pocket card? A lot of them raised their hands, and they did. Maybe if that had continued, by now every police officer would memorize the attributes of a police officer, and he would take the challenge of ensuring that he's knowledgeable of the provisions of all laws.
Yeah, so thank you, IGP retired, for the work you've done. So, like I was saying, the process was started, but it wasn't part of the law. So it was more or less something that was done just to help the situation. Yes. But now it is a law, and it has to be obeyed. So that policing plan actually gives you a kind of strategic idea, a strategic plan for the police. This is what we want to do. There is really need for training. And if you also look, even the curriculum that we use to train our police needs to change, because we are in the era of democratic policing. So the police needs to... I think I saw a video recently, maybe you must also have seen it. Some people, they say, in quote, I think there are a lot of doctored videos. But the young man, they were hitting his head with something, and they said they were going for recruitment for police. And people were asking, is it part of the training? So the curriculum has to change. And why should it change? Policing is not about force now. It's not about gathering of intelligence. And technology has made life easier. So most of the things you actually need force and manpower is training and education on hardware that can actually help. Of course, we know what happened, is it in Dubai, where Nigerians committed a crime. Yes. Within 2 or 3 hours, they were all rounded up.
Cameras
got them. That brings us to the issue of funding. You remember there was a time the government started installing CCTV all over Abuja as a pilot project. Yeah. I don't know what happened to that. I also remember that the police...
They have not been done, but you should know what happened.
Yeah, there should actually be an investigation on who was given the contract and what happened. I also remember that the police had substations actually for these cameras, even outside Abuja, I think in Kaduna and some other places.
Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and I think Kaduna.
Yes.
4 pilots.
Where they could actually be monitoring what is happening, which is basically what happens in advanced countries. Once you enter a country and your passport is signed, they start trailing you. It's normal. Once you leave a car and move into the place, CCTVs will always capture you. So somehow if you do anything untoward, they will just follow the procedure of how you enter the country and pick you up. And that is technology. So there is need for us to start looking at how we can infuse technology with our policing principles. Yes. It's no longer about manpower. It's about ensuring that technology drives intelligence gathering. Yes. And once we have intelligence gathering, most of the things we use force will actually reduce. Then the other thing also is retraining. Things are changing. Technology is also changing. The pandemic has also shown us that we didn't really need to come here to do this thing. We could have been at the comfort of our homes, and you use technology to beam all of us together, and Nigerians will still see all of us, but we are not here. So I think there is need that's also one of the key things that this law is trying to do, giving the police an opportunity to redefine policing and not just insist of old things. It's a new dawn, but that new dawn will need to ensure that everybody works together to make it happen. It's not just about the law. It's also about the political will for government to support, for the police itself to also know that change is coming and they need to abide by that change, and also for Nigerians to actually support the Nigerian police force.
All right, Dr. Olubo, thank you very much. It's Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return from the break, we'll, of course, continue with the conversation and also listen into the tweets that have come in from our viewers.
A new edition of TV featuring great personalities from all walks of life. Expository interview with a young TV presenter who shows passion on what she does. Morayo Afolabi Brown of TVC. Pick a copy of this compendium of mind-blowing stories and get abreast with issues as regards media convergence, leadership, health, star profiles, star programs, fashion, sports, human angle stories, and lots more. Meet some media professionals within our space who have paid their dues in no small ways. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
You're welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, the largest TV network in Africa. Before we get down to the tweets, let me just get to the IGP first, at least briefly. Right. We've really, seen how things have been unfolding, especially in the past 7 days when this act came out. Right. And people have been talking about it. We shall talk more about that. Right. In the tweets, I can see there are some responses there. Right. But Subo rose a topic, an issue that is talking about technology now. What's the place of technology in this very act, and how is it going to address the problems of the police force in Nigeria?
I am not a lawmaker, but I want to believe that the funding that the law is talking about modern, state-of-the-art equipment for the police. That money is not meant for buying just guns and all that. I'm sure that funding is talking about improving the status of policing in Nigeria, to be on the same level with what we see in other countries of the world. Mm-hmm. Few policemen doing a lot of work. Mm-hmm. From the comfort of the control room, a policeman can be able to detect the camera that says, I have just seen a wanted person. And that's the kind of cameras you are seeing being abused, destroyed in Abuja. They are the same type of technology. If, for any reason, any of those cameras sees the eyes of a wanted person, so long as his biodata is documented, believe you me, the control room, that camera will notify the control room with an alarm. And then the nearest police patrol team will be directed to arrest him. Because it has not only seen his face, it has seen the clothes he's wearing, it has seen the direction he's going. So it's just a matter of telling, maybe even plainclothes policemen, to arrest him, and that's it. That's technology. That's policing, modern policing.
Thank you very much. Yusuf.
Yeah,
I'll just, the aspect of technology is indeed multifaceted. Apart from what is just indicated now, earlier he was citing the example of traffic police officers jumping into the car or a vehicle of a driver who has run the red light. Elsewhere, the traffic lights have their own inbuilt CCTVs. Correct. You don't need to see any police officer. Yes. Once you run the red light, a photograph is taken of your number plate. Yes. It's there, and then of course your number plate also goes into the database, and they know where you are. Yes. So there's no, they just come and give you a ticket. Correct. If you do not pay the ticket, it continues to multiply, and before you know it, you have a bigger sanction. Yeah. So all of that, drones, purchase of drones, and using all of that, I think those are key things that, well, we seem to have a societal challenge with infusion of technology into our everyday life. Yeah, we cannot brag about Zoom now and so on and so forth, but see how difficult it is to reform our electoral processes by bringing in technology. part of the magic that worked on Saturday in the Edo election was the simultaneous transmission of results and parallel tabulation of votes. That way you can minimize the intervention of persons who may seek to finagle with all of those issues. But I do hope you belong to the police trust fund. So the trust fund should not just be. You chair the board, yeah. But you belong. You belong.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, before.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
I know, but
with a lot of responsibilities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, IGP. These are the kind of things, the kind of investments we would like to see. To see that the police set off their drones. You know, they tell you that kidnappers are on the Abuja-Kaduna highway. You don't know where they are. They are taking them 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers into the bush. Set up your drones. Your drones will pick them out, and that's it. Yusuf, you said we were going to take some tweets. Or you still have some questions.
Did really,
yes.
but
Certainly you will see a lot of that. But the only thing is we are supporting the Nigeria police. I cannot be an Inspector General of Police again.
You are retired.
Yes, thank you very much.
Now let's get down to the tweets now. And then Hassan Sadiq said, "Good morning, Kingsley and Co. With all the features highlighted under the new Police Act 2020, I must say it sounds interesting and welcoming. But I just hope this wouldn't be a case of an old wine in a new bottle."
Now, Festus Akimboewa, one of our regulars, tweets, says, "Why the Nigerian Police Act 2020 addresses police funding, professionalism, and takes policing closer to the grassroots, it is silent on the clamor for state police and limiting officers' use of force and disbandment of SARS."
Chris Simeon says it's highly commendable. Nigerians are expecting the Nigerian Police Act 2020 to reposition the force in terms of transparency, responsibility, and incorruptibility. Taking all these aspects into consideration, NPF, that is Nigerian Police Force, will be given pass mark.
Law Alpha C, entrenching professionalism, transparency, proactiveness with attendant meaningful remunerations should be the hallmarks of the law in line with global best practices.
And Dele Jackson Solomon Emija says, "No doubt, the bill will provide for a more effective and well-organized police force driven by the principles of transparency and accountability in its operations, that is, and management of its resources. The implementation of this bill for the reforms of the Nigerian police is sacrosanct."
Montana Farouk says the new Police Act has made provisions to articulate the salient issues that will enhance professionalism and welfare of the police officers. I believe a lot still needs to be done in terms of quantitative assessment. There is need to recruit more men and officers now.
Mike Anyako says we need positive reforms in the Nigerian police force. The time is now. We must cleanse the organs stubble and the organization for overall interest of everyone. The recently assented Nigerian Police Act 2020 by President Muhammadu Buhari is a welcome development and will go a long way in achieving results in terms of efficiency and effective policing of the country.
Repositioning the Nigerian police force is a step in the right direction as it would foster cordial relationship between the police and the general public.
And for Mohamed Ibrahim, while we welcome the recently signed NPF Act, I hope the section that takes care of their welfare, salary, and accommodation will be given priority. So also I hope the SARS unit was also taken care of by reorganizing them for efficient services to the nation.
Now, I skip another one by Suleiman Babagana. We've already taken one from him. Utulo Sunday says the Act provides for effective and organized policing if and only if the police personnel will work with the stipulated Act.
Comrade Alejingala says, the Nigerian Police Act 2020 is a good development, and this will enhance and make the police more attractive.
Aliu Umar Karaye says the new Police Act is a wonderful achievement because police activities will become more transparent if effectively implemented. It will also enhance coordination between communities and the police in such a way that security challenges can be minimized.
And finally, on the tweets, Cecilia Okoroma says, All that the Nigerian police deserve is regular mentoring and training. Nigerians must be made to understand that police officials go through a lot of difficulties in the course of their work, and cooperation by every citizen will improve their attitude to each and every one of us.
All right, so those are the tweets that we have from our viewers in the meantime, and we're going to accommodate. There's one aspect of the new Police Act 2020. I've read so many conflicting versions and comments, but it's a very important aspect, and namely, who is entitled to prosecute. Now, we have seen over the years how poor prosecution has led to the collapse of otherwise tight cases against persons who have been arrested and therefore arraigned. Excuse me. Now, what is the provision? As I said, probably I should just indicate part of the conflicting things that I've read, that it is no longer the case that any police officer can prosecute in court, but that you must be a lawyer in the police force to be entitled to prosecute a case. And presumably, therefore, this is to enhance the quality of diligent prosecution. What exactly is there in the provision, and how might this be much more readily achieved? Let's begin first with Benson.
Thank you. I'll give my own personal opinion. I mean, it's subject to different interpretations. Now, what the law says, so you take it back to the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. Of course, you realize that the Administration of Criminal Justice Act is a federal legislation that's only applicable to Abuja and, of course, federal institutions, and the police is a federal institution. So that provides that for you to prosecute, you must be a lawyer. What has happened is that the states that are adopting that implementing legislation are not following that principle. So in some of the states, the issue of whether you're a lawyer or not a lawyer is silent. So which means that in some states, you can still prosecute if you're not a lawyer. But under the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which is applicable in Abuja, you must be a lawyer. Now, what this act has tried to do is try to phase out that is happening in the states by saying police officers who are lawyers are the ones who will prosecute. But it's still, it's still subject to interpretation. You know, we apply, Nigeria, there is this plurality of law in Nigeria. So under the exclusive legislative list, there are things that only the federal government can deal with. So when it comes to criminal law is under the concurrent list. So states have the power to legislate. So if a state says, whether you're a policeman or whether you're a lawyer, you should prosecute, that still holds in that particular state. But if you're prosecuting under a federal high court, or you're prosecuting in Abuja and you're not a lawyer, then you are actually going against the provisions of the law. This is my own view, but it's Kiru, have a different view.
Yes, I think it's very interesting you asked that question, because I also read some kind of different assessments on that provision. I think that's in section 66 of the Act. What it actually says is that police officers who are legal practitioners can prosecute. So it settles it. But I think where the confusion may be coming from is because in subsection 2 of that section, it kind of creates some kind of exception. It says that police officers may still prosecute offenses that non-qualified legal practitioners can prosecute. So I think the question is, what is non-qualified legal practitioner? So I think some of the commentators were like, if someone is a legal practitioner, then it's assumed that the legal practitioner can actually prosecute. But I think the intendment of the drafters is, cases that non-legal practitioners can prosecute in the states. So I think what it did was, it started off saying police lawyers can prosecute, but now went ahead to create an exception, subjecting it to state legislation. So it's actually subject to different interpretations, and I'm hoping that the courts really would develop jurisprudence on this, because it's the use of that word non-qualified legal practitioners, I agree, it's a bit confusing. But like Benson said, criminal justice is, there's concurrent legislative powers. The states can make laws. So I think there's still this issue of, if the state has a different law, which one holds. Well, the basic premise is that it should be legal practitioners. But I think to also quickly add to that is that the law now further goes on to say that every police division must have an officer that is qualified to practice. So maybe I think the intendment is to encourage, the injection of more lawyers into the police force, so that the whole idea of a police officer who is not qualified won't even come up in the first place. But I think in terms of interpretation by the courts or implementation, I think things will get clearer as time goes on.
Yeah. Well, okay, thank you so much.
Well, I'm a lawyer too, so.
Do you want
yes, of course. Let me say that it's a good development, no doubt, because it will challenge police officers to read law. I read law in the service, and after 2 attempts. Now, if the law of a state says it permits a police officer to prosecute, even if he's not a lawyer. But that reference of the fact that unqualified legal practitioner is clearly protecting those who have degrees in law, but have not gone to law school. I think it's just protecting those ones, that they can prosecute. But it's also a challenge to them to reach the next level. And to me, it's a good development.
Well, IGP Suleiman, I think we need to really we have some few minutes left on this program, but we want to speedily talk about the funding of the Nigerian police force. It's all about, the bill or the act is all about, trying to bring up Nigeria to the level of best practices, international best practices if possible. We mentioned some of these aspects here. Kinsley gave some examples of some CCTV, cameras and how these things are being done somewhere. You had the police trust fund, and although you say you're not going to really have to fund them, but you're going to support them. How do you see, Nigeria pairing up with other countries in this regard, as regards the basic aim of this very bill, which is to arrest insecurity and criminality in Nigeria?
Yes. The Nigeria Police Trust Fund has 3 main objectives. The first objective, and I'm happy to say that is how the law stated it, is training and retraining of police officers and other police personnel. That means even non-police officers, but working with the police. That's, for example, those that are working in specialized sections. We need to train and retrain them so that they will become experts. They can perform better. That's the effectiveness and the efficiency will now come in. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we'll be funding. No, we'll be funding. We are not going to, we'll be funding the police. There's no doubt. The whole purpose of establishing the trust fund is to improve the budget of the police. So we'll be funding the police. Now, the second objective of the trust fund is equipment, to ensure that the police is equipped to standard, modern equipment, including vehicles and so on. For example, we are introducing the Federal Highway Patrol. The Inspector General of Police is a trustee. So we've discussed it, he has gladly accepted it. And it was just an error of judgment. When the road safety was created, it's like when the NDLA was created, the same thing happened. Leave the drug issue to us. The same thing happened, leave the highway to us. But they can't do it. An NDLA, there is just about 5,000. How can they stop the escalation of drug addiction, drug peddling in the country? That's why we are having these problems. The same thing, we are introducing the federal highway because no country in the world do their police abandon the roads. None in the whole world.
But we still see policemen on federal highways. Sometimes co-located with road safety, or some other time, just a few hundred meters, some 100 meters apart.
Those are anti-crime patrol of the localized police.
Okay.
Not the Federal Highway Patrol. The Federal Highway Patrol performs almost the same functions that the Federal Road Safety is doing. The only unfortunate thing is that the Federal Road Safety does do it. Protecting the highway, reporting damages on the road, assisting accident victims.
Which they do.
Which they do, I accept. And investigating incidents and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then finally,
yes,
the Nigeria Police Trust Fund, third objective, which is the last one, is to improve the welfare of the personnel. The aim here is that when you improve the welfare of a worker, he's likely to give in his best.
Okay, thank you very much. There was a point that the former IG raised. I don't want him to respond to this question. I want to give it to Dr. Benson Olugba, maybe Nkiru, before he makes his last comment. He says, look, we have to boost the manpower levels of the police. At some point, he indicated we needed about 500,000. But there is also the very strong view that even the existing strength of the police force is misused. We have the incidents of what is often referred to as rent-a-cop. You have tens of thousands of police officers paid from the public purse, no matter whatever the challenges they may have with their remuneration, who are on private policing duties. How do we overcome this under the rubric of the new Police Act?
Yeah, I think it's all about political will. And if you also go back to the history, former IG will always say that most times when the IGs come in, one of the things they will say is that all police officers who are attached to politicians should come back. It's like they do it for 2 weeks and then people go back to the beats and all those things, which is a difficult thing, really. And I think it's something that we should actually confront headlong. One of the critical things is that maybe they do now. We don't have the real statistics of how many police officers we have. From what we have gathered, if you look at the payroll, it's like 300 plus. Now, there is this thing about one police officer to 400 citizens, which means we're also 200 million. So for me, the ratio is really pathetic. But there is need to have more police officers. But like what I said, and that's what I will conclude with, it's not really about manpower. It's about ensuring that manpower is fused into technology. And I think that is what will solve the problem. Having more police officers may not solve the problem, but the ones we have, if we train them and ensure that they use technology, it may solve more problems.
Nkiru, 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, the Act does not prohibit the use of police officers for protection, but there is this provision called on the supernumerary police officers, spy police. I think that is where it expressly allows officers to be attached as orderlies, for protection of property of persons. So I think it depends on how it's implemented. And then I think the IGP even is trying to now recruit special constables. It's in the new act now. I think it's similar to the UK model, where special constabulary, where auxiliary or part-time personnel or regular people can volunteer and do kind of low-risk police
but what we find are Mopol officers mostly, armed with assault rifles, who are on private guard duties. Former IGP, you say you know why it continues to persist.
I will answer, but
what is the antidote? Very briefly.
I will answer that. If you are the Commissioner of Police in Rivers, and for you to survive, and when I say survive here, because you don't have sufficient funding, you withdraw your personnel from all oil companies, and then they get replaced immediately by the military or by the civil defense. Will you be comfortable?
Not really.
Now, second one.
That's a reality check.
Yes. Arrest in lieu. How will you feel if a kidnapper kidnapped an 80-year-old woman? But the police in its investigations was able to trace his own mother and picked her. No,
IGP Suleimani, it seems we are running short of time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This can be another discussion for next time. We thank you so much for being part of this program this morning, and we hope when next we come calling, you come. For sure, we need to really talk more about this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed.
Nkiru Uzodi, it's our pleasure you've been here with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And so also Dr. Benson Olubo, it's our pleasure that you've come along, and then the discussion continues. It so seems as if the Police Act is a work in progress. It should be a work in progress because a lot needs to be done.
Yeah.
So thank you so very much for being part of it. We thank you so much for being part of Good Morning Nigeria this morning. I am Yusuf Darabusman.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Stay safe and be well. Good Morning Nigeria returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning.